This is Phil Chandler for TotnesTV.com. This short film is about the pedestrian nightmare that is Totnes, particularly the High Street and the areas up at the top of the High Street called the Narrows. We're going to start here. This is the bridge. This is the old bridge in Totnes, and I'm looking towards Bridgetown, which is the newer part of Totnes, despite what it looks like from here. I'm filming this on a Sunday because any other day of the week this road is so busy that you'd have difficulty hearing me. Because of the way the streets are laid out, this is the side of the bridge that most people cross over. As you can see, the footpath is not generous by any stretch. Two people passing carrying shopping bags, one of them will inevitably have to step into the road to avoid a collision. This is the junction that all foot traffic has to cross in order to get from Bridgetown into Totnes High Street. And you'll notice that neither this side nor the other side of the junction is there a pedestrian crossing. There are buses, trucks, cars, motorcycles, everything coming through here. And on a busy day, which is most days of the week apart from Sunday afternoon, which is when I'm filming this, this is a very busy junction indeed. So absolutely no provision for pedestrians here at all. Having crossed into 4th Street Totnes, you'll now find one of the wider pavements in Totnes. So enjoy this one because they don't get much better than this. Apart from this section here, which nobody really seems to understand the proper use of, this area of the town, this lower end of 4th Street, could actually be a model for the rest of the town. It has wide pavements on this side at least, and to some extent on the other side. The traffic is one way and restricted to a single carriageway, and there is roadside parking provided, albeit at a cost. As we proceed up 4th Street towards the High Street, we encounter one of the more serious hazards for pedestrians. This is the junction into Station Road. As you can see, if I take my life into my hands and stand with my back to the traffic, this is looking up into the High Street. And of course, in the old days, that was a straight on with a right turn into Station Road. This is Station Road here. But of course, now, technically that's a left turn. Of course, virtually nobody indicates. So anybody standing here where I'm standing right now, waiting to cross the road, is going to have to look down 4th Street and hope that anybody coming up the hill will actually indicate a left turn if they're going up the High Street. The signs at the bottom of the High Street here, which say access only effectively, and give a width restriction of 13'6", are roundly ignored. At least the access only part is roundly ignored by virtually everybody who drives up here. Far more traffic comes up into the High Street than actually should. As you can see, there's another car coming into High Street, probably without any legal justification and not indicating, and another one. So this is quite typical on a normal day in Totnes. There's a continuous stream of traffic coming into the High Street without indicating and without having a genuine legal reason for being there. That means that the volume of traffic in this street is much, much higher than it should be. Because Totnes is essentially an Elizabethan town with a lot of very old buildings in it, you'll see, if I point the camera upwards, tile-hung buildings. These buildings are constructed of largely a timber frame with basically wattle and daub behind those slates. There's usually no more than about 2 or 3 inches of material between those slates and the room inside, which means that any noise here in the street is transmitted directly into these buildings, and because of the timber frame construction, these buildings can vibrate quite strongly, and there have been suggestions that the structural integrity of some of these buildings could be at risk because of the heavy traffic that comes up this street. This street, of course, was designed for foot traffic and horses and carts, and not cars at all. Here's a fine example of absurdly narrow pavements, made worse by some half-wit installing traffic bollards, or whatever they might happen to be, on the edge of the pavement, making it virtually impossible to walk past that with carrying a bag of shopping. And of course there's a supermarket only 100 yards down the hill, so a lot of people do try to carry shopping past this obstruction. If you make it with your shopping bags past these posts, the next obstacle you encounter is a set of steps. The entrance to a shop, another bollard obstructing your access, and you've got to make it around these steps on a busy day, carrying your shopping bags with traffic this close to you. And you'll notice here that the pavement virtually disappears. Having come through under the arch, you'll notice that the pavement all but disappears again on this side, and you have to be pretty much a high wire act to be able to walk along this bit of pavement without stepping into the road. It's virtually impossible. The pavement on that side of the road isn't particularly wide either. Certainly for pushchairs, for wheelchairs, and anybody carrying shopping, this is a very poor state of affairs in a modern town. Totnes, of course, is a medieval town, and it was designed around the horse and cart rather than the car. But I don't see how that is an excuse for having pavements like this in the 21st century. This road has been recently resurfaced at huge cost, and an opportunity was missed at that point to make these pavements much more usable and much less dangerous for pedestrians. This road is much wider than it needs to be for vehicular access. Even the widest truck can get up here with several feet to spare, so there's no reason why that pavement couldn't be wider. And to my mind, conservation is no excuse for making life difficult for people who are living today. A couple of years ago, some genius decided that it would be a terrifically good idea to raise the surface of the road at this section to the actual level of the pavement. Which means that without making any effort whatsoever, cars can swerve and kill somebody without even feeling a bump. They tried to ameliorate the problem by putting these bollards here as a way of just getting in pedestrians' way yet again. Having made these so-called improvements and creating what could effectively be a useful extra parking area on this side of the road, they then plant an extraordinarily ugly sign telling you that you can't actually park here unless you've got a permit, or unless you happen to be going to church, which could be seen as a form of discrimination, I think. But whatever you think about it, that sign really looks out of place in a conservation area. So here we are looking down High Street towards 4th Street, and you can see a continuous stream of traffic even on a Sunday afternoon. During the week, and particularly on Fridays on market day, this is a very, very busy street indeed. And I would estimate that probably 70 to 80% of the traffic is not actually following the correct access protocol. A lot could be done to improve matters simply by enforcing the access to the High Street rule, but of course nobody's going to do that, because that means employing somebody to stand down there and actually stop people coming up the High Street who don't have any good reason to do so. Another wasted opportunity. Hundreds of thousands of pounds were spent modifying this front end of the market square last year to create a loading bay mainly for the market. Of course, the market only happens on Fridays and Saturdays, and yet for the rest of the week you're not allowed to park here because it says loading only. Double yellow line here indicates that you're not supposed to park in front of this access through into the market square, which is as it should be, of course. However, some bright spark extended the double yellow lines over here, making this car technically illegally parked for no good reason. There's a perfectly good parking space there potentially, but somebody couldn't be bothered to figure out how to paint yellow lines in the right place. And because our only late night opening shop is located in one of the narrowest parts of the street, there's a very strong demand for short-term parking at this point. And in fact, the only short-term parking here is taken up entirely with a huge disabled parking bay, which is rarely used to anything like its potential by disabled drivers. As you can see, even on a Sunday afternoon, there's overspill onto technically illegal areas. There's people parking in the disabled area who probably shouldn't be there. And this is quite typical of any given day of the week, and it gets worse in the evening. I'm standing now in the area known as the Narrows, which as the name would suggest, is actually the narrowest part of the high street. As you can see, it's only really one car wide at this point, and yet there is no additional speed restriction. Technically, this is a 30-mile-an-hour zone. In fact, it's quite a dangerous corner here because, as you can see, the pavement on that side of the road is virtually non-existent. Right at that point, right on the corner, there's barely room for one person to go past. You are forced to walk on the road. There is no choice, and yet there is no traffic constraints at all. There's no sleeping policemen, there's no bars on the road, there's no signs restricting cars to a lower than 30 miles per hour limit. There is no pedestrian priority signs or anything, and yet cars are able to travel through here at technically up to 30 miles an hour. As you can see, parking on pavements is also a problem in this town. When people can't find anywhere else to park, they often park on the pavements, despite the fact that the pavements are so narrow. And as you can see again, over that side of the road, no pavement whatsoever. Just to remind you, I'm filming this late on a Sunday afternoon. There's virtually no traffic here at the moment, but on a typical weekday there's a lot of traffic along this road, and when people finish work at around 5 o'clock, you get a lot of cars coming around this corner at pretty much the speed that they're allowed to, and yet the road is often full of pedestrians. And again, you can see here there's no pavement whatsoever.
Yes, I do. I'm talking to the wrong person.
There's a lot of support for pedestrianisation in this town, and equally quite a lot of opposition to it from business interests. However, it would be very easy to turn the Narrows into a pedestrian priority area. All it would take would be a couple of sleeping policemen and some signs to force traffic to go through this area at a much slower speed and increase the safety for pedestrians. There are a number of other things that could be done, of course, including the widening of pavements, the removal of useless bollards, the provision of short-term parking. A lot could be done by enforcing the access-only rule at the bottom of the high street and only allowing vehicles up here that have a good reason to be here.